Hello, I'm Riele, and today I would like to share this pastel painting process with you while talking some germ theory nonsense. A couple of words about the piece I'm working on. In spring 2023, I sketched my usual model, this time with me looking up to him from below. And a year and a half later, I unearthed this sketch to paint it. I'm using Pastelmat paper and various brands of soft pastels. I decided on two light sources, a cool light from a screen on the right and a warm light bouncing off the wooden walls of an old Swiss country house. But rather than painting the wood, I simplified the background to a single color. And what color can be better than red? When I was a kid, I only used red pencils, markers and paints. Later, I learned how to use other colors but could never get why. This channel risks acquiring a dangerous channelopathy, turning into a book review channel. After all, most nonsense I'm spitting out here comes from books. I have been reading very little over the last decade, as the main place to read for me is public transport that I use only for 10 minutes at a time nowadays. But recently I read two books that are worth talking about. The first one is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy that I shamefully have never read before. The first thing that struck me from the very beginning was anaphora in almost every phrase. The whole text is built on anaphoric repetitions, and it works surprisingly well, although any modern editor would cut them mercilessly. The second surprise came close to the end. With a certain attitude, you may read it as a book promoting critical thinking and showing the dangers of mediums and spiritualists. The only unequivocally negative character in the whole book is a medium, and he is the proximal cause of the tragic ending. Now, I am well aware of pitfalls of such a recommendation. The novel, for the most part, is not about that. For me, this is the worst type of a spoiler. Knowing plot twists in advance doesn't spoil them for me, but expecting something that the book does not deliver in full does. What it can deliver is the sense of transition and progress, both in terms of technology and society. And that brings me to the second book I'd like to talk about, The Remedy by Thomas Goetz. Coincidentally, it covers roughly the same time period. Some time ago, I learned that Conan Doyle came to Berlin as a physician and a journalist to witness the demonstration of tuberculin, the prematurely proclaimed cure for tuberculosis developed by Robert Koch. Once back, he described this affair in his article for the Review of Reviews. By the way, this Review of Reviews was just that, a periodical that assembled the most interesting materials from other periodicals that in turn reviewed the primary newspapers and magazines. Conan Doyle was not able to meet Koch nor to attend his lecture, but could see the patients treated with tuberculin and was unimpressed. His article sets a sarcastic tone starting from the very first sentence. To the Englishman in Berlin, and indeed to the German also, it is at present very much easier to see the bacillus of Koch than to catch even the most fleeting glimpse of its illustrious discoverer. Conan Doyle delineated Koch's career and discoveries up to that point and then went on to his adventures in Berlin. He could not meet Robert Koch. Then he tried to attend the lecture of von Bergmann. By the way, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel that Bergmann Glia was named after him. But Conan Doyle could not get in. "There is no place," he shouted, in answer to my modest request that after traveling 700 miles I might be admitted to his lecture. "Perhaps you would like to take my place. That is the only one vacant." Then, as I bowed and turned away, he roared after me, "The first 2 rows of my clinic are entirely taken up by Englishmen." As I happened to know that the only Englishmen at his lectures were Mr. Malcolm Morris of St. Mary's and Dr. Pringle of the Middlesex Hospital, I was as little impressed by his accuracy as by his courtesy. Conan Doyle then could get into one of the TB wards where patients were treated with tuberculin with the aid of Dr. Hartz of Michigan, proving the good old principle that blood is thicker than water. Here and there I saw a patient, bright-eyed, flushed and breathing heavily, who was in the stage of reaction after the administration of the injection. For it cannot be too clearly understood that the first effect of the virus is to intensify the symptoms, to raise the temperature to an almost dangerous degree, and in every way to make the patient worse instead of better. Conan Doyle's conclusion was that tuberculin had little therapeutic potential, but he was the first to recognize its merits as a diagnostic tool, and indeed, it was developed into tuberculin skin test, also known as Mantoux test or PPD. As to the efficacy of the treatment, the skepticism with which it has been encountered in some quarters is as undeserved as the absolute confidence with which others have hailed it. It must never be lost sight of that Koch has never claimed that his fluid kills the tubercle bacillus. On the contrary, it has no effect upon it, but destroys the low form of tissue in the meshes of which the bacilli lie. Should this tissue slough in the case of lupus, or be expelled in the sputum in the case of phthisis, and should it contain in its meshes all the bacilli, then it would be possible to hope for a complete cure. When one considers, however, the number and the minute size of these deadly organisms and the evidence that the lymphatics as well as the organs are affected by them, it is evident that it will only be in very exceptional cases that the bacilli are all expelled. By the cessation of the reaction after injection, you can tell when the tubercular tissue is all cleared out of the system, but there are no means by which you can tell how far the bacilli themselves have been got rid of. If any remain, they will of course cause by their irritation fresh tubercular tissue to form, which in turn may be destroyed by a new series of injections. But unfortunately, it is evident that the system soon establishes a tolerance to the injected fluid, so that the time must apparently come when the continually renewed tubercle tissue will refuse to respond to the remedy in whatever strength it may be applied. Here lies the vast difference between Koch's treatment of consumption and the action of vaccine in the case of smallpox. The one is for a time at least conclusive, while in the other, your remedy does not treat the real seat of the evil. It continually removes the traces of the enemy, but it still leaves him deep in the invaded country. So, while looking for this article by Conan Doyle, I stumbled upon a modern popular science book about this story, the aforementioned Remedy by Thomas Goetz, and ordered a copy. Goetz did a fantastic job of tracing the origins of the germ theory of disease and its way from a marginal idea to a common knowledge that informs people's behavior. He was also very considerate at showing how the mighty fall, specifically talking about the tuberculin fiasco of Robert Koch and the story about Conan Doyle wholeheartedly believing in the Cottingley fairies, photographs made by two girls of each other with fairies cut out of some children's books. Of note, Tolstoy in his later years thought that his earlier writing was frivolous and not focused enough on the important moral topics. At one point, however, Goetz is not telling the whole truth. Koch in his later years was depicted as almost a freak who claimed that the tuberculous agents in humans and in cattle are different, and hence pasteurization of milk would be useless to combat human TB. And according to Goetz, nobody believed Koch, and rightfully so. But this is an oversimplification. In fact, human Mycobacterium tuberculosis and bovine Mycobacterium bovis are two related but distinct bacteria. Humans can contract bovine tuberculosis, most often by consuming infected milk, but it is by no means the sole or the major source of human consumption, except for maybe certain rural communities, and definitely not in Europe in Koch's time. By the way, the BCG vaccine is an attenuated bovine strain that was cultured for 13 years of glycerin potato medium. So Koch was indeed right, the two bacteria were different, however, was mistaken about the possibility to contract bovine disease. Another tiny issue that I noticed was that when Goetz listed the early Nobel Prizes in medicine, he mentioned Finsen and his skin diseases, but failed to note in a book about tuberculosis that these skin diseases were in fact skin tuberculosis or lupus vulgaris, not to be confused with systemic lupus erythematosus, which is an autoimmune disease. With this, I'll be wrapping up nitpicking on great books, and I highly recommend both of them. As for the painting, I am pretty happy with the result. It was a difficult palette, but I feel I pulled it off. Meanwhile, he lost his glasses that I was not ready to render on such a tiny format. Like this video if you enjoyed it, dislike if you didn't, share it with your friends, share your thoughts in the comments, it really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.